Thank you so much, Simon. Yeah, my name is Christian Hirsch, and I'm working for Keysight Technologies. For those of you who don't know us, we are a vendor of test and measurement systems, such as network load generators. But today, I would like to cover a topic on the cybersecurity space. It's about hack yourself and find issues before others do. First of all, why does it make sense to hack yourself regularly in the network? For sure, you guys are aware that your network is exposed more and more involving threats, bad user behaviors, and so on. So there are more motivated attackers available. But one of my favorites, I don't want to go into the details as you know them anyway, is the temporary policy exception. So I guess everyone knows if you have an issue or you want to bring up an application and it's not working as you expect, someone is calling the security department and ask for a temporary policy in the firewall, for example, to allow a certain type of traffic. And later on, this temporary exception becomes a static case. No one monitors it. And this is an ideal way for hackers to break into the network. So it's very important to know that the complete security infrastructure is always working. We have in the field an increased level of complexity. So nearly weekly, we see new products in the market. We see new trends that, for example, the pandemic situation brings more and more people working from home. So more traffic at the end needs to either use VPN to send it back into the company environment in order to let it inspect or push it in the secure access of a service edge, where you have cloud environments and they need to be protected. And then for sure there are a lot of tools available in the market in order to optimize all this alarming to make security operations more and more effective. We have dynamic environment, so these days servers or services can recognize that they are overloaded and they start themselves to deploy automatically additional web server instances, virtually scale up, and when they're not needed anymore, they can scale down again. And this needs to work beside the security infrastructure, automatically improve the security policy and add an additional rule into that. The problem is, for sure, prevention is great, but it's not sufficient enough, as nearly all the time prevention is not 100% effective. A compromise takes sometimes only minutes or less to getting executed and stays unmonitored for months. What do we have else instead of preventing things? Sure, there is the complete detection space, so everything what you can monitor. We saw today a lot of presentation about how to monitor the network infrastructure, the security infrastructure. We are having the complete visibility portfolio from tabs into network packet brokers, because you can't protect what you can't see. There is an own challenge by its own. If you have east-west bound traffic in a cloud environment, where probably the network traffic from a web server to a database backend is never touching a physical wire, but stays inside a compute node. And there's a complete trend for noise reduction, like really filtering on the alarms which are mattering to the security experts. So the idea is now that it's time for a change in order to test the tools, the people and the processes, and ideally regularly, automatically. So if we look on today's security validation options, I brought here two axes. One is how often you run these kind of security validations, and the other one, how complete it is from the perspective of compared to how a real attacker would do it. So in the top left corner, we have a vulnerability assessment. This is any kind of products you have in the market who scan through the network, look for open ports, look for patch levels on different systems, and give you at the end recommendation to update some of your machines or close close security vulnerabilities. So this makes absolutely sense, and for sure there's low risk because it's just scanning passively through the network or even proactively through the network and looks for open doors or security threats, but it's not try to use the threats and bring down a server. In the middle, we have penetration testing or red teaming. This is when you hire a consultancy company or a hacker in order to use any kind of products they have available in the internet or coding by themselves to break the network. There is some risk for sure if the hacker succeeds and hacks and brings down your database backend. It might happen that your customer have an issue when they browse your web page. But on the other hand, you don't do that on an hourly basis or even daily basis. You do that not that often anymore. The third option is for pre-deployment security testing. You do that usually in a lab, in an isolated environment. So before implementing a new firewall, new IPS, IDS, you bring it in the lab and you check if it keeps what you promise from them or what the vendors promise from them. You compare the results with the data sheets because it's always very important you run that with as close to the live network as possible. And this is for sure also no risk at all because you run it before you implement it in your live network. It's in a lab. So now we have a new idea of how to test in a production environment. And this group of tools, Gartner called them breach and attack simulation, are designed for the production environment. So they should fill the gap in between what you can run really hourly in order to measure things, but have no negative impact on the real production environment. So how Gartner defines it, it's a tool that allows you to simulate activities that are used by hackers safely within your production environment. I marked the simulate and the safely red because safe means it's highest priority to keep your service up and running. When you try to hack yourself, you should not expect any kind of impact on your live production environment, but you test your production environment on that. And simulate means it's not real. It's like a vaccine right now. It's not that you really get a shot with a real virus in it. It's just a reduced version of it, which has the DNA or the mRNA of it, and shows you that your body can build antibodies against it, or in the IT language, they can catch the attack or the pattern by the signature, but they are not able to start and multiply themselves and do lateral movements and infect the whole infrastructure. So how it works is you start modeling the threat vectors, you simulate security breaches, and at the end you get a kind of distributed monitoring with a security score reporting. And that's now what I will show you with the threat simulator. So it provides enterprise security teams, also service provider security teams or managed security service providers, the possibility to really actively measure the complete security infrastructure. And how it works, it's designed to really work in a multi-cloud environment as well as an on-premise deployment. So you deploy endpoint agents in your bare metal installation, in your own private data center, or in the public cloud somewhere. And on top of that, there is a dark cloud simulation, which is nothing else than additional endpoints owned by us. So you have a management portal where you configure everything. And finally, you can execute tests. You can execute security threats and attacks on that. So the workflow is you start installing the agents, which takes just a few minutes. You define then the agent groups, and you can start validating the security infrastructure and get the insights. Who of you ever heard about the CyberKillChain? Okay, not too much. So it's worth to mention what it is. So the idea is that aerospace defense company, Lockheed Martin, started to explain that usually it's all on the assumption that cybersecurity threats or attacks are happening in stages, and every interruption in the complete stage can stop the complete attack finally. So the first phase is the reconnaissance phase, where the attacker usually is browsing for victims. I try to visualize that by somebody crawling the trash. But let's say an attacker is looking for a potential victim or even scans the network for victims. The weaponization phase is the phase where the attacker builds the code or purchases and invests in some kind of code and use that. The vulnerability. The delivery phase is where the attacker really hand over the piece of vulnerability, either by giving away a USB stick or sending a mail with an malicious content on that. Exploitation phase is when the victim starts to execute the code, and it's using exploitation or vulnerability in order to get access to the system. The installation phase is where the backdoor is then installed. Command and control communication is where the installed machine starts calling home and asking for who to attack finally. And the last stage finally is the action on objective, which might be a distributed denial of service attack, or it might be data exfiltration and so on. So the idea is that we can really run through this cyber kill chain on different stages. So just imagine that, for example, there is a bank in Switzerland who has an open position for a controller. So the attacker can start browse in the reconnaissance fence, and they find it. So they use infected PDF containing his own CV in order to apply for the job role. So there's already a high chance that within the HR department, someone is opening the CV. And then the PDF, which is prepared with a malicious piece of code, runs with the exploitation phase. And the idea now is that we run through this through all these different kind of stages in order to really challenge the different parts of the involved security infrastructure. Some of them are in the endpoint, so like, you know, the products such as Kaspersky or Symantec, Internet Security, all these products, what you have directly on the endpoint deployed, as well as the network security part. So the use cases before coming into a demo is, first of all, the continuous validation of the complete security infrastructure in order to see how it operates and get KPIs of it. Second use case is quantify the impact of any latest security breaches. Sure, WannaCry is not one of the latest anymore, but I use it because many people are aware what happened here in the past. It was a ransomware. Third use case is the security technology assessment. You want to do some kind of vendor backoffs and check how performs vendor A versus vendor B. And the fourth, and in my case, the most underrated use case is to educate the network and security staff. So you see how your system is behaving when it's under attack. So to summarize, it's safe. It's always the attacker as well as the victim are simulated in the network. It's not attacking a real end service. It's just attacking a victim which is deployed in the same network domain. The malicious payload is never executed or really downloaded. We send it through a wire, but we don't install the ransomware, for example, on our endpoint, so it's not starting with the lateral movement and infects other machines. The agents never contact malicious hosts in the public domain. It's realistic, it scales, it's repeatable, it's end-to-end because we run through the cyber kill chain. And it can run continuously, so you can also recognize drifts in the network. That yesterday you had 70% of a prevention score, while today it's 65% probably. Okay, now let me give you a short demo how this looks like. And what I did here is, for the demo environment, I deployed 2 of these endpoint agents, which will represent the enterprise network in a very small condition. I used AWS, so Amazon Web Services, to deploy 2 instances. And my security infrastructure is a really cheap one. It's just a security group, so I layer 4 filter, and I allow, or I decide which kind of ports I allow. But I think for the demo, it can do the job here. So I deployed the agents, and here on the assessment side, we are having a library of any kind of audits available. Hope the Wi-Fi is still somehow coming up. Give me a sec. Next try. Okay, so we're having a group of different kind of attacks, and also there is in the industry, in the cybersecurity field, the CyberKillChain is a very simplified approach with 7 stages only. Most security operations center these days are working with a MITRE attack framework, and so we also implemented the categorization based on that one as well. But to keep it simple for my demo now, I will stay on the kill chain, and what I will do is I will use the WannaCry attack because it's known by many people. And I will start explaining to you what happened on the real WannaCry with a ladder diagram. So what we do in the first stage, we use the internet, our dark cloud simulation, and send the Eternal Blue exploit onto one of our first victim, our internal agent. Eternal Blue exploit was a vulnerability using in the CIFS, the Windows file sharing protocol, and in order to get root privileges or administration privileges, and it started then to install a backdoor. After that, the real WannaCry, it checked with a DLL what is the keyboard layout, because the attacker came from Russia and they want to make sure that if there was a acrylic keyboard layout, they just dropped it and they didn't start. Next stage is the command and control communication. So it started to talking home. This is where to validate that the victim is a legit one. And then the hard drive started to get encrypted. So it was a ransomware finally. And for sure, we don't encrypt the real hard drive from our agent here. Next step was it downloads the Tor proxy browser, and it uses the Tor proxy in order to communicate the private key of an encrypted hard drive. So we simulate all these steps before, with the step number 6, we start with a lateral movement, shifting from one internal agent into a second internal agent. And then it starts from the beginning again. So what we can do is we can use this audit and build a scenario out of it. And all we have to do is select the agents where we want to run it on. And at the end, if I scroll down, I see I created this scenario already. So what I will do is I just play it from here. So now our management is connecting to the agents and starts with the implementation of the tests. And they start running now stage by stage. It's not a real secret that the attack is completely allowed, so we don't prevent it because of I had a very insecure inbound policy here. For each of a stage, we are also able to do kind of a deep dive, so we can generate a PCAP out of it to more deeper see what happened with the Eternal Blue exploit. And we can also get recommendations, so you can define which security infrastructure you have on the way to the endpoints. So then you get really dedicated recommendation, like it's a Fortinet firewall, please enable feature ABC in order to get a filtering on these signatures, or if it's Palo Alto and so on. In addition, you get all the details regarding which IP address got used, the public and the private ones, and so on. Let me jump back. So what I will do now is I just modify I follow one of the recommendations to disable the SMB from externals. So I just delete the line and save it again. And now when I rerun the same test again, I will see it's getting mitigated. And what I can do in addition to these, that was just a single audit. That was just a single audit. I can start a whole bunch of tests. Like if I know I have a web application firewall somewhere, I can run a complete test of web application security, like sending a lot of cross-site scripting attacks and SQL injection and so on. So it really depends what kind of security you want to test. But the product is really powerful. It's a powerful tool and gives you recommendation and insights finally into the security. Now let me rerun it again to see that it's mitigated. And the database of threats, for sure, it's growing on a daily basis. If we look into that now, we are right now in a phase from the internet, try to use the eternal blue exploit against our first agent. Recall I just deleted the CIFS opening and now it's blocked and the other tests are skipped. Our kill chain is interrupted and the final attack is not going to happen. Okay, any questions? Simon is coming on its way.
No questions?
No questions.
Okay, then.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.